Hello, this is a video response to some of the inquiries made by MattWG. There's a bunch of different threads we're starting up, so just want to kind of combine them into a video since it's a lot easier to respond in a video to more complex issues than to post in 500 characters. So just going to go through a couple of the recent ones and kind of explain a little bit. MattWG wrote, in terms of how sin and consequences, that a child should not and would not inherit the ticket or the consequence. I was using an analogy. My argument was that love and lust are not mutually exclusive. Such things being separable, I did not dispute. Lust without love isn't love at all. It's an oxymoron. Um, and talk about morality and things of that nature. So start with that one. First off, I'd like to talk about the inheriting the sins or whatnot. Of course, like I was making a point before, that sins have consequences. Again, if you speed, you get a ticket. Yes, in some cases, the sins and consequences of that do not get passed on, but there are many cases where it does. For instance, a child in a mother's womb, when the mother has a drug addiction, will end up getting the same addiction as well. Or if someone has, say, an alcohol problem, the family often can suffer because of it. The very nature of sin is that not only it harms us, but it can harm others, and that's both put in biblically and just in the world around you can see. Again, that's assuming you assume the basis of sin, but in general, actions, whether sin or not, have consequences that can positively or negatively affect other people. I think we can both agree on that one. In terms of love and lust, I think it's going to come down to a biblical definition or how you define it. If you're using the word lust as simply a physical desire, it'd be somewhat a little bit different because whenever lust is talked about in terms of biblical and when I discuss it or whatnot, I usually carry a negative annotative term that it's a self-centered desire and the wanting of the flesh. Versus in the Bible, usually doesn't use the word lust when it terms about a natural physical desire for your spouse or something similar. But the nature of lust, as described in biblical terms, would be more along the lines of, again, that self-centeredness, that you lust after someone or something, and it's a self wanting to please, a gratification of the flesh. So you can have love and you can have physical desire. That's not, again, incompatible. But the type of lust that I would be referring to, I think, would be the one that be absent of love. Because if you love someone in the agape sense, again, going back to the different types of Greek loves, agape love is selfless. So, for instance, when me and my wife are intimate, I'm seeking to please her, not as much to get pleasure myself. And by both doing that, of course, that's where that agape selfless love versus lust, which again more is a self-ish looking to please the self or whatnot. That's why the lust of the heart or whatnot, when you look at someone lustfully, you're seeking to satisfy yourself. You wouldn't look at someone lustfully seeking to satisfy them because it's in your mind, etc., etc. So depending on the definition, is how we're going to be looking at that. Now, whether or not, love and lust or whatnot or sin or not depends again on morality. Now, morality itself is subjective if you don't believe that there is a higher authority. So I have, in terms of even homosexuality and things like that, other than the actual physical issues that can arise with homosexuality, if you're not a Christian, I don't expect you to hold the same viewpoint as a Christian does, that homosexuality is a sin, along with looking at someone lustfully and things of that nature. Fornication, all those in the same category. And that's one thing I also like to stress is that, in terms of the issue of homosexuality, fornication, looking lustfully, all those are also in the same category. So I think sometimes it raises an issue that Christians will attack homosexuality without looking at the plank in their own eye. As Jesus said, they point out the speck in their neighbor's eye and ignore the plank in their own eye, that they also may be looking lustfully at others and things of that nature. So to me, all those things in terms of a biblical sense are sinful. If you don't believe the Bible, don't believe God exists or one other higher authority, then I have no expectation at all that you guys would be against homosexuality unless you have some personal conviction yourself. So morality will be subjective if there isn't a higher authority, and so that would be the divine question. Now, whether or not we can argue that God's morality is the right one, I usually leave that for first, or that question until after we discuss whether or not God exists. Because if God doesn't exist, then it doesn't really matter what his morality says, just as much as if I say the pink bunny rabbit next to me says that you shouldn't eat carrots ever again. That morality statement doesn't have any effect if the pink bunny doesn't actually exist and doesn't have a moral standing to be judging morally. But if God does exist and there is adequate evidence for him, which I would argue that there is, um, then at that point in time, you have to make a decision. Okay, if God exists and He has a higher moral authority, and there's evidence towards that, then do I adjust my viewpoints to match His, and whose is going to be the ultimate authority? So, again, and just going to be that. And there's people who aren't Christian that think homosexuality is wrong. They have a subjective view that homosexuality is wrong, not based on any higher authority other than their own personal opinion. So, who is right? Society changes its morality quite frequently. What again was one day was good is now evil. What was evil one day is good the next. So it's kind of a hard thing to say you're right, you're wrong, or you're being immoral or moral unless you have a moral basis to start with. Otherwise, it's just subjective morality. In terms of another comment made that I want to hit on is that the basis of why I say is my interpretation of the Bible. Other people might have different interpretations of the Bible, and again, your interpretation of the Bible is that the Bible is pro-slavery, rape, genocide, etc. And that I would be sure to receive some justification for interpretation of yourself, and be sure the views are not objective among all Christians in the past who justified their acts through their own interpretation of the Bible. So let's hit on the last part first, and we'll get to the first part. In terms of people interpreting the Bible their own way, yes, a lot of people have. In fact, it's addressed in the Bible where people have deviated from the true teaching of the Bible in order to gather a following or to justify their actions. Sadly, there's been a lot of evil done in the name of Christ, but completely unbiblical, and that happened a lot because the Bible wasn't there. In terms like the Crusades, which are often pointed as a big negative of a Christian act of violence and evil, the papacy and the Pope and the Church or whatnot was very much a state-run thing, and they would not allow the common people to have Bibles. But in fact, the Reformation is when they finally started getting Bibles out and going back to biblical doctrine, because they were saying that we have the Scriptures and we're going to read it to you, but not actually giving them what the Scriptures say and not in the whole. So there's a lot of issues done with just the manipulation of evil, but doesn't necessarily mean that that's a biblical viewpoint. Just as much as like saying that I am a follower of Gandhi, but I go and kill people violently in protest, that doesn't match up with the Jehovah's text. Now, in terms of the other things, the pro-rape, pro-genocide, etc., I'll touch on the rape one first, because that seems to be a common contention. One thing that's really important to remember is that the Bible is as much history as it is revelation. So there's things in the Bible that are told because it's history, but we're not sanctioned by God, and some things that are sanctioned by God and told. The situations of rape were not sanctioned by God. Now, there is one verse that people often miscue that talks about how they go to kill all the boys and the women, but leave the women and the girls that have not slept with a man, and he said, keep them for yourself. Now, that's not really a good translation. The actual Hebrew word just connotates to keep them safe, keep them alive. It does not have any sexual connotation whatsoever. As of course, if they already had a husband or wife or whatnot. So, I mean, did some people probably end up marrying or whatnot, or giving a marriage? Possibly, but no way to give a sexual connotation to it. Now, there is verses where the Israelites were telling their brothers, the Benjaminites, that they lost other people because they're evil, to go and to capture and take women for their wives. Now, that's, again, I would attribute more to history, because God himself never ever sanctions rape. And of course, you're always supposed to be married before even engaging in sexuality. God never sanctioned multiple wives, and in every situation where there was polygamy, it ended up in great evil, strife, and everything else. And Jesus himself said that he made them one man and one woman, and the two should become one. So there's a lot of things that the Israelites did, and they were punished for them severely. I mean, probably the most punished nation was Israel itself, if you read through it fully. It was just recording the actions, and you'd have to take a look again at the original text and the context around it, in order to get a better picture, because people can take a translation which might not be the best translation and skew it tremendously. I'm going to make a part 2 to this because it's going a little bit longer, so look for that one.